we'll transition to Joel, who'll talk about food assistance programs in the U.S. Floor is yours.
Thanks, all. So my talk is going to be a little bit different. I am going to first present a very brief overview on the landscape, very brief. I think my entire presentation has no numbers. But then I'm going to talk about, I'm going to reverse it. So the public, non-economists, non-researchers have a lot of questions about food assistance programs. So we're going to talk about questions that the public have, controversial issues that the public have, and what research has been done, at least that I have seen and come across, that speaks to these issues. This being said, this is not going to be a comprehensive overview of food assistance programs. The literature is voluminous, so I'm sure you have a favorite paper on SNAP, and you probably also have a paper on SNAP, and it's probably not cited here. That is not a personal insult on my side. A lot of this presentation is going to be about what I'm going to call the big two in terms of at least discourse, SNAP and WIC. I'll give very brief overviews on these two programs in a bit, but I would be remiss if I didn't say there are a number of other programs around. These are, since they're not the big two, some to a lot of extent, they're a bit smaller than SNAP and WIC. There we go. A lot of these programs provide actual physical food, or at least access to specific food products. The FDPIR operates on Native American reservations. You can choose to be either on SNAP or get money or get benefits through FDPIR, but not both. The Commodity Supplemental Food Program is for individuals 60 plus. When I was a grad student, I wrote a paper on people 60 plus, and I called them elders. And my advisor, or my paper advisor, who at the time was like 62, didn't appreciate that. So then TFAP provides USDA commodity food to food banks, who then distribute that to food pantries. And then there's what I'm calling school-based programs or institution-based programs, like school lunch program, school breakfast program. I put school in quotation marks because the child and adult care program gives it to, as you see, daycare programs. I'm going to talk very briefly about SNAP and very briefly about WIC before going into these kind of common questions that the public has and what research has to say about these questions. So SNAP, most of you probably already know most of the stuff. So eligibility and amount of benefits is based at least when you apply as a household, on your level of income, taking into account different deductions and your household size. The benefits can be used to buy food products to prepare at home, or at least to eat at home from participating stores. Unlike common discourse, at least, you can't buy tobacco products, you can't buy alcohol with SNAP. You can't buy restaurant food or prepared food, for example, as well. And the benefits come on a debit card-like thingy called an EBT card. You swipe it just like any other debit card. Of course, if you are buying paper towels along with your other stuff, you have to split it into two transactions, and you have your SNAP transaction and you have your normal cash transaction. WIC is for pregnant women and children under the age of, or up until the age of 5. The monthly benefits are for specific food products, and each state has a list of specific food products that are WIC allowable. But these products include things like eggs, milk, dairy products, whole wheat things. So have any of you had whole wheat tortillas? Okay. Yeah, so they're vile products but so they are covered under WIC. When I was a grad student, my wife and I got WIC, and we got tons and tons of whole wheat tortillas. The hell do you do with whole wheat tortillas? So, but my wife grew to love them. I grew to hate them, and this is like the biggest marital strife that we have. But you also have like $5, $10 worth of fresh fruits and veggies, so that's the thing that you have more choice over. Nowadays, benefits come on, again, an debit card-like thingy. It used to be the fact it came in an envelope with a lot of coupons in it, and you had to spend the coupons, get the cashier to sign the back of them. Super annoying. I refused to do it after a while, but so my wife was in charge of that. But you would get these at regular well child checks. So I can't remember how often it was for us. It was every 3 or every 6 months we would bring my son in, and he would get weighed, and we would meet with a WIC nurse. And that's still the case. You just don't get the envelope full of coupons. So that's all I'm going to say as an overview. See, I said no numbers. What I want to talk about now is controversial issues, questions that the public has about these programs. I know my limits, so most of what I'm going to talk about is about SNAP, but a lot of these concepts do translate to other programs such as WIC. I just don't know these programs or that literature as well. First question I want to ask, or that the public wants to ask, why food assistance? So assistance could come in kind as for either benefits specifically for food or as specific food products themselves, or you could give just cash. As economists, we know lots of cons of downsides of giving in-kind benefits. Constrains the choice set, and you're at least weekly worse off than if you had just had cash. As an aside, this is not just public food assistance programs. Like Joel Waldfogel's paper on the dead weight loss of Christmas is essentially the same argument that you shouldn't give presents to your family members, you should only give cash. Wonderful paper if you haven't read it. So also most recipients, as you would expect, about 75% of recipients do prefer having their benefits, or would prefer to have their benefits distributed in cash instead of in kind. But we don't listen to them. The pros of having in-kind benefits, there's some pros in the economics literature. For example, better targeting towards states of the world with higher marginal utilities of consumption for that specific good. At some level, it's not clear whether these pros are legitimate pros or just post hoc rationalizations for something that we've already decided is a good thing because of paternalism. We want to make sure that recipients don't spend benefits on temptation goods or bad things. I will say that this isn't a completely unfounded issue. In a recent paper that I am not citing because it says do not cite over the front, Amy Finkelstein and Anna Chorney have a paper, and Matthew N. have a paper on comparing how people spend out of SNAP benefits versus SSI, which is unrestricted. And out of SSI, there is an increase in more temptation good spending, exactly as you'd expect. So again, I did not cite that paper. On some level, though, this sort of shouldn't matter if we believe our economic theory, at least. As long as you were going to spend more, or at least as much, on, say, food or another, or whatever that target product or target good is. So for us, it's food. As long as you're going to spend more on food than you get out of the food assistance program, so most of this literature has been about SNAP, you would expect households to be able to just rearrange their income sources and buy the exact same amount of product as they would have if they had been given cash benefits. With the exception of one paper that we can talk about later afterwards if you want, most of the literature has rejected that this is the case. It does seem that people spend more on food out of SNAP benefits than on cash assistance. And there's lots of reasons for that, including perhaps mental accounting. One thing that the public, and by public I mean higher level public officials, like to think about is how to keep people from using public assistance or food assistance. The public administration literature has this concept of administrative burdens that I think is very helpful that we can talk about more, but it's hurdles to jump through to use the program. There is evidence that more administrative burdens does actually reduce participation in the program, and WIC spending is consistent with this at least as well. All right, does getting food assistance make you lazy? Maybe in the 1960s, there's a paper by Hoynes and Johnsonbach that said there's a decrease in work effort when the food stamp program was rolled out. But the devil's in the details. Who reduced their work effort? It was single mothers. There's actually lots of good research showing that if you force single mothers to work, child outcomes are worse. Nowadays, Chloe East has a paper that says, meh, not so much. Don't worry, truth isn't going to stop the fact that we're still going to make people work. The FGA, Foundation for Government Accountability, is rolling out state-level programs all the time. There is a SNAP work requirement that they're trying to beef up. I'm rolling through these slides pretty quickly because I want to get to some of the more research-heavy stuff. People have looked at what these work requirements do. There's robust evidence that they do decrease work, that they do decrease enrollment in the SNAP program, but it's less clear what they do about employment. Most of the papers find no effect on the impact of these work requirements on employment, with some exceptions. Exceptions are people who work near the threshold, perhaps disabled people as well. Does getting SNAP make you unhealthy? Again, whether it does or not has not stopped the fact that we want to implement policies to solve this problem. Two policies consist of either incentives or restrictions. Incentives consist, there's the early work that Park Wilde did on the healthy incentives pilot, GUSNIP, formerly Finney, and also a program that I'm involved in that had, on healthy fluid milk incentives. Lots of interesting research on how these incentives should be structured and the modes that they should be delivered in. But they robustly do increase spending on the target goods, as you'd expect. Whether HEI or diets in general change is a separate issue, and it's less clear. Restrictions, as you would expect, research has shown that they would be at least expected to reduce spending on the target goods. But again, the impact of these on overall diet quality is a lot murkier. Last thing is who indeed deserves food assistance at all. So again, I'm bringing in the public administration's literature. Public administration looks at deservingness, who deserves these programs at all. The more deserving someone is perceived as, the more support the public has for this person getting assistance. But there are the more misperceptions you have about the racial makeup of these food assistance programs, or your racial animus actually reduces your support for these programs. And this is sort of an issue we've been dancing around in this whole discussion, is who deserves assistance at all, who deserves to have their benefits reduced to just food, who deserves to be able to buy whatever they want using food, who deserves to get food as without working. And so this is kind of in the background, kind of hovering above all of this research discussion that I just went through.
So Joel, that was fantastic. My understanding of that literature on intra versus extra marginality had been that receipt of SNAP did lead to increased grocery expenditure, but at the expense of food away from home. Can you say a little bit about that?
Good question. No, I can't, actually. So I don't know the food away from home literature as well. But that's a great question, and that's a good question. Yeah.
Thanks, Joel. Ooh, that was loud. Thanks, Joel. Really do appreciate the presentation. I'd like to hear a little bit more about this idea of administrative burden. As we just saw, the bill that was passed is increasing the concerns of participating in the workforce and changing some of the rules. And I would argue that there's going to be a period of time that folks are not going to be sure what the rules are. And so there's an adjustment there, but then the extra burden of what these rules may mean. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts about what this is going to look like with SNAP participation and in potential workforce engagement.
So there's a way in which all of what I just talked about is increasing administrative burden. So reducing the set of things that you could buy with SNAP does make transactions more complicated. So a lot of what is being discussed and through the recent bill is going to be increasing the burdens, the actual burdens of using the programs, but also the learning costs of learning how to deal with these things on the part of the participants is also a significant administrative burden. Learning for the participants, but also learning for the SNAP implementing organizations. I know with my work on the SNAP work requirements, the SNAP implementing organizations, it's a super complicated process, and if you have to keep changing it every couple of years, you have to retrain a couple hundred workers, caseworkers, on complicated new regulations, and that's a big thing too.
Thank you very much, Joel.